Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyav Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantirme Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, Sarva Sarvatra Nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravir Mahedhi Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. So we'll continue our study of the opening address that Swamiji gave at the Chicago Parliament. Last week we saw the historical context about how these events unfolded. We saw it very briefly, and how Swamiji found himself finally as a representative at that Parliament of Religions. In the beginning was all the series of welcome addresses, and because Swamiji was not even sure of being accepted as a delegate and was not familiar with all the prepared speeches, so he had not prepared anything at all. And so what we are going to study today is an extempore talk that he gave. It's a very brief talk, but kind of set the agenda, so to speak, not only for what he was going to say later on in the Parliament, but also for the general hope and the purpose of that entire gathering itself. So he begins by these 5 words which have become pretty famous in Vivekananda literature: sisters and brothers of America. We read, as we saw, that these 5 words, very simple, unassuming as they seem, somehow had an electrifying effect on the audience. While these sentiments were expressed by other speakers, both before and after Swamiji, somehow, when he uttered them, we read that something struck. It struck a chord in the hearts of his listeners. The historical accounts say that hundreds and thousands just got onto their feet and gave him a standing ovation, even before he had said anything further, just the way he addressed them as sisters and brothers. And we saw last time how briefly, when we say something, when words come just from here or here, they may have some impact. But when the words come from the heart, when the words come not merely expressing an idea, but expressing a deeper experience, those words become much more powerful. So when we address someone as sisters and brothers and actually see them as one's own sisters and brothers, that's a much more powerful thing. When we address someone when we tell someone, thank you, or I love you, and when we say thank you, the heart is truly filled with gratitude, that thank you will sound different than just a mechanical thank you that we say all the time. So that's how Swamiji begins, sisters and brothers of America. It fills my heart with joy unspeakable to rise in response to the warm and cordial welcome which you have given us. I thank you in the name of the most ancient order of monks in the world. I thank you in the name of the mother of religions, and I thank you in the name of the millions and millions of Hindu people of all classes and sects. So first he is offering thanks, as it is customary to do. But it's also interesting in whose name he is thanking the audience. So I thank you in the name of the most ancient order of monks in the world. Now, the word order of monks or the monastic order is a word not very easy to define. For instance, now, the order to which I belong, the order which founded by Vivekananda, by the inspiration of his teacher, oftentimes we just refer to ourselves as belonging to the Ramakrishna order, which is by no means the most ancient order. It just started a little over 100 years ago. So when Swami Vivekananda said, in the name of the most ancient order of monks, it's clear he was not referring to the Ramakrishna order. He was referring to the institution, the monastic institution itself. And while religious expression, how we follow our religious traditions can take many different forms, one of the forms in which the religious truths are pursued and followed is through following the monastic path. And in one form or another, the monastic tradition itself is much, much older. So when Swamiji says, I thank you in the name of the most ancient order of monks, he's referring specifically to the monastic tradition and more particularly to what in the Vedantic tradition is called the institution of sannyasa. The word sannyasa comes from the word nyasa and with the prefix sam. Samnyasa means letting go of the entire thing. So not holding anything back as one's own. In other words, letting go of every baggage and being truly free. What prevents us often from advancing in life are the different strings that are holding us back. And the monastic ideal is represented by the effort to try to cut all strings, so that just as a bird, if you tie the bird's feet on this thing with a string or close the bird in a cage, the bird cannot fly. But once all those bondages are removed, the bird can fly freely. We are like that. We want to be free, but all kinds of strings are attached to us. Some of those strings we are aware of. Some of those strings are very tangible. But there are many invisible, intangible strings as well. And so the monastic ideal represents the effort to let go. That doesn't necessarily mean that one has already been able to let go, but it shows the ideal towards which a person is striving. So I thank you in the name of the most ancient order of monks. And then he says, I thank you in the name of the mother of religions. Now, historically, it is believed that Hinduism is among the most ancient religious tradition. And because he was representing Hinduism, it's possible to say that, well, he was thanking in the name of Hinduism. But he could have said that straight off. Instead of that, he chooses to use the phrase mother of religions. So it's possible to interpret this phrase not simply in terms of a historical entity like Hinduism, but what is the mother of religions? And oftentimes the distinction that we make between spirituality and religion, I think, is applicable here. So it's possible to think about a religion beyond all religions. It's possible to think about a religion with a capital R, a religion that transcends all specifications. What distinguishes one religion from another is a focus on certain personalities, and personalities involve certain names, certain forms. It involves the visible aspects, a certain kind of architecture for a place of worship, certain kind of rituals, language. All of these more tangible forms of religion differ from one another, because many religious traditions have developed historically in different parts of the world at different points in history. And they have been shaped and they have been nourished, so to speak, by the local cultures and languages and customs of the part of the planet on which they grew. And that's wonderful, because only a bare set of abstract ideas. It doesn't take hold of anyone's imagination. So we need a living, visible manifestation of faith. So it's great that religious traditions have forms and names and color and sound and words. While these are useful, they also can become limiting in certain ways. In other words, certain forms, certain names, certain rituals can ring a bell in someone's heart and may leave somebody else totally cold. And people are different. Swami Vivekananda once said, inspiration can never be filtered to the entire humanity through just one personality. And so one of the things that is often emphasized in Vedanta is that principles can be universal. Persons, not necessarily. And therefore, if we can think about extracting the religious principles behind every great religious tradition, extracting the principles free from all personalities and any kind of a specific defining forms, that distilled form of religion, free from all of these, would be truly universal, because it would not then be limited geographically to any one section, or culturally to any one part, or even historically to any one specific point in history. And it is that religion with a capital R Swamiji is referring to here as mother of all religions. So someone said that there is only one religion, and all religions which we see around us are only different versions of that one religion. So it's possible to understand this phrase, the mother of all religions, as a religion beyond all religion. It's a little bit like the phrase that gets sometimes used, the God beyond God, so to speak. Paul Tillich, one of the Protestant theologians, in one of his books, he uses that phrase, the God beyond God. We find echoes of this in Meister Eckhart and in many other theologians from different traditions. Somehow, that the idea of God that we have can be very meaningful, can be wonderful to us, but it's also possible to recognize that when my understanding evolves, when I'm able to transcend my own limitations, the God I pray to, the God who is meaningful to me now, the way that God appears to me would also change. In other words, I and my God are related. As I evolve, my God evolves. Now, God doesn't evolve. My idea of my God evolves. In fact, there is this book called The Evolution of God. It really doesn't mean God is evolving. It just means the way I understand God evolves. And that's pretty obvious, right? When we were little children and when our parents said, oh, pray to God or pray, well, we have some idea of God when we are little children. And clearly, as we grow up, we don't think about God exactly the way we thought when we were, say, 5-year or 6-year or 10-year-olds. Clearly, our idea of God has evolved. And there is no reason to think that the way I think of God now is like fixed, cast in stone. Nothing can change it. It doesn't make sense. So if my idea of God has evolved with age, with maturity, with understanding, with insight, with clarity, then as I evolve, as I become more mature, the way I see God will also evolve. So just as we can speak about God beyond our present understanding of God, we can speak about a religion beyond our present understanding of religion. And that is what Swamiji could be referring to when he said the mother of religions. And I thank you in the name of the millions and millions of Hindu people of all classes and sects. This is also interesting that Swamiji is specifically making a mention that he is representing everyone. Why is it possible to make a special mention of this? It would seem that although we have, even in interfaith gatherings, we have representatives, or we have not just religious gatherings, there could be a gathering of, say, political leaders from different parties, or it could be cultural leaders from different cultures. What often happens is that although we may speak about these people participating in these forums as leaders, it's not that easy to be representing a large section of people, because people are different. So even in interfaith gatherings, when you have somebody representing Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and so on, that one person cannot be, that's too much of a burden to be representing an entire tradition. So what usually happens is that person is really representing, surely that person is a representative of that tradition, doesn't necessarily mean that person, when that person expresses something, is going to represent the whole spectrum of thought in that tradition. That's just not possible. What often happens is that in such representative gatherings, it's the elites of the different traditions that have the opportunity, the privilege to voice their opinion. And so sometimes what they say may not represent the entirety of the tradition. And therefore you will see, and this is true of every religious tradition, that the theologians in many traditions, they speak one language. It's kind of a world. The theological world is its own stream. Then there is the popular religion, the religion that is actually practiced by people in their day-to-day lives. That goes in one direction. And then there are other religious specialists. When they speak, so there are all these different streams going, and they don't always communicate well with each other. So a scholarly study of religion and a devotional study of religion and a kind of a practical following of religion may all be parallel lines. And so Swamiji wants to make clear here that he's representing people of all classes and sects, not representing only a certain. One of the things that should also be kept in mind is that many of the Vedantic texts, the Hindu texts, are written in Sanskrit. Very few Hindus have studied the Vedas. Vedas are just too vast. Very few Hindus have actually even studied the Upanishads. They may have heard the word Upanishad, but the number of people who have actually studied the Upanishads is few. Gita is much more popular, but even then, I would think that relatively few people have even read the Gita, tried to make a deeper study of it. And yet, that doesn't mean that those who haven't studied the Gita, the Upanishads, are not like good Hindus. For many Hindus, their practice of religion comes sometimes by just what they have read in the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, from the books of history and mythology, what they have seen, the family traditions being practiced by their parents, their grandparents, the kind of things, the prayers and rituals they have had at home, what they've seen around them. So a textual study of religion and a ritual study of religion. So these are all different strands. And what Swamiji is saying is that he sees himself as representing not just the elites, not just a certain aspect of religion, but people of all classes and sects, of all different layers of religious people everywhere. My thanks also to some of the speakers on this platform who are referring to the delegates from the Orient, have told you that these men from far-off nations may well claim the honor of bearing to different lands the idea of toleration. I am proud to belong to a religion which has taught the world both tolerance and universal acceptance. It is clear from this that several speakers before Swamiji had referred to many of these delegates who have come from the Eastern countries and said, spoken highly about their idea of tolerance. And what Swamiji is here doing is, while he thanks them for acknowledging the idea of tolerance in these other traditions, Swamiji takes it one step further, that he says, we believe not simply in tolerance, but also in universal acceptance. There is a subtle but an important distinction between tolerating someone and accepting someone. Tolerating someone would mean, I don't quite like it, I don't agree with it, maybe you're wrong, but okay, I'm not going to kill you for it, or I'm not going to make a big deal about it, I'll tolerate you. That's one way the word tolerance can be understood. And acceptance is, my way may be completely different from yours. Perhaps a lot of what you do doesn't make sense to me, but I accept you as you are. I'm not judging you, I'm not saying that you're wrong or you're this. I just recognize that just as I have my own way of praying, my own way of doing it, and I want that, I expect to be free to pray and understand life in my own way, I respect your freedom to also to understand and pursue your goals in your own way. That is acceptance. Acceptance is not necessarily agreement. Acceptance doesn't necessarily mean anything. It just means that I accept you as you are. And I think this is a very important ideal. It goes far beyond simply tolerating someone. And this is very much needed today, not just simply to deal with religious diversity, but the diversities we see in so many other different fields. The distinctions, the judgments people pass regarding race, with gender, with sex, with sects, with class, all of these things, the more we have this idea of acceptance, the better the world we will be in. So Swamiji is here making an important distinction between simply tolerance and acceptance. We believe not only in universal toleration, but we accept all religions as true. I am proud to belong to a nation which has sheltered the persecuted and the refugees of all religions and all nations of the earth. I am proud to tell you that we have gathered in our bosom the purest remnant of the Israelites who came to southern India and took refuge with us in the very year in which their holy temple was shattered to pieces by Roman tyranny. India has, among the Jewish communities the world over, India has among the very old communities who came, as Swamiji says, in the very first and second centuries. They settled mostly in the western parts, the southwest part of India, and the number was much more until the 1940s. After the creation of Israel, many of them, when they invited the Jewish communities from all over the world, many of them emigrated, but a good number of them stayed back. They had developed roots in there, and in fact assimilated with the Indian community so well that many of them chose to remain in India. In fact, I read articles when I was growing up about how some of them said that this is our chosen land. So there were some who truly didn't want to go. And there were a few cases who left and went to Israel, settled there for some time, and then again came back. In any case, some of the oldest synagogues in the world are present in India today, in the western parts. And that's what Swamiji is referring to here. And when these Jewish communities, when they came, they were given complete freedom to practice their religion in their own way. There was no persecution, there was no anything of it. They were welcomed. And that's what Swamiji is referring to. Same is true with regard to the Parsis who came around 6th and 7th century. That's what he refers to next. I am proud to belong to the religion which has sheltered and is still fostering the remnant of the grand Zoroastrian nation. After the Muslim conquest of Persia, when that time the Zoroastrian religion was a predominant religious tradition in Iran, which is present-day Iran. And so many of them, to escape persecution and proselytization, they spread. They first went to the northern part of Iran, and they went to the island of Hormuz, according to some, and then they came to the western part of India, primarily in the present-day state of Gujarat. And that's why many of these Zoroastrians, or better known as Parsis in India, they adopted the language in the land in which they settled. And so many of them speak Gujarati. And today, the number is dwindling all over the world. Most of the Parsis we see in India are there in Gujarat and in Bombay, Maharashtra area. So he refers to these two, gives two examples, the Jewish communities and the Zoroastrian, the Parsi communities. When they were persecuted in their own lands, when they came to India, they were welcomed and they faced no persecution. And they were not just tolerated, but accepted. So because he speaks earlier about the difference between tolerance and acceptance, he gives two examples in which what does that acceptance look like? What does that acceptance mean historically? That it's not simply a theoretical concept, that this is exactly what happened historically in India. I will quote to you, brethren, a few lines from a hymn which I remember to have repeated from my earliest boyhood, which is every day repeated by millions of human beings. As the different streams having their sources in different places, all mingle their water in the sea, so, O Lord, the different paths which men take through different tendencies, various though they appear, crooked or straight, all lead to thee. Swamiji is here referring to a verse from the Gita. It comes in the 4th chapter, 11th verse. In Sanskrit, it goes like this: Ye yatha mam prapadyante tams tathaiva bhajamyaham mama vartma anuvartante manushyaha partha sarvashaha. So you find a similar idea in many other texts as well. How just as streams and rivers, they originate in different places, they go in their own meandering paths, and ultimately all go to the ocean. Similarly, the different paths that people take, and this can refer to different religions, but it can also refer to the different sects and denominations within a religion. We know many of these world religions today, while we may speak of them in singular, they are really, in some sense, all have to be referred in plural, because there are so many denominations within them. And sometimes in one sense, it might seem to be like one tradition, but they almost in practice function as two different traditions. One of my experience with regard to this was immediately after 9/11, there were many, clearly, because of the situation, many interfaith panels were organized, and I was invited to several of them. So there was a television live program of an interfaith discussion, and I was invited at it. And there were 3 or 4 others on the panel. There was a Buddhist representative, there was I don't. There was one Congregationalist minister. There was one minister from the American Baptists. I was there, and there were two others. So before the program actually began, and then the moderator was speaking with us informally, and then the American Baptist who was sitting next to me, he kept on telling the moderator, when you introduce me, don't introduce me as a Baptist minister. You must say American Baptist, American Baptist. And I was fairly new, so I wasn't much familiar with the subtle distinctions. So I just asked him gently, I said, oh, what is the difference between Baptists and American Baptists? And then he was a fine gentleman. He just looks at me, smiled, and he said, Swami, there is a greater similarity between your tradition and my tradition than between me and the Baptists. Now, whichever way he might have meant it, I just want to say that this example about different rivers ultimately meeting into the ocean refers to not just different religions, but the different streams. We could speak about the Catholics, the Protestants, and the different denominations within Protestantism, the different sects within Hindus, where there is Vaishnavas, Shaktas, and so on. So, and in Islam, there is the Shia and Sunnis. So, these are the major streams within these world religions. So, what this verse points out is that no matter which of these streams we are in, so long as we follow it sincerely, with faith, with devotion, so long as we are earnest, ultimately we will all go and meet at the same ocean. The present convention, which is one of the most august assemblies ever held, is in itself a vindication, a declaration to the world of the wonderful doctrine preached in the Gita. Whosoever comes to me, through whatsoever form, I reach him. All men are struggling through paths which in the end lead to me. Actually, the verse I quoted is actually a translation of this one. Ye yatha mam prapadyante, tams tathaiva bhajamyaham, mamo vartmanu vartante, manushyaha partha sarvashaha. The earlier verse about the rivers meeting to the ocean comes from, there is a hymn called Shiva Mahimna Stotra. And that Sanskrit is like this. Ruchinam vaichitryat, rujukutila nana patajusham, nrinam eko gamyas tvamasi payasam aranava iva. So that is the verse from the Shiva Mahimna, which speaks about the different rivers meeting into the ocean. And then Swamiji concludes the last part of this talk. Sectarianism, bigotry, and its horrible descendant, fanaticism, have long possessed this beautiful earth. They have filled the earth with violence, drenched it often and often with human blood, destroyed civilization, and sent whole nations to despair. Had it not been for these horrible demons, human society would be far more advanced than it is now. But their time is come, and I fervently hope that the bell that tolled this morning in honor of this convention may be the death knell of all fanaticism, of all persecutions with the sword or with the pen, and with all uncharitable feelings between persons wending their way to the same goal. It's a short talk. The question that we need to ask is, this is a very aspirational conclusion that with the beginning of this great parliament of religions, whether this would bring the death knell of all fanaticism, all persecution, all uncharitable feelings. And today, more than 125 years later, we can say, no, it didn't kill off all persecution, it didn't kill off all fanaticism. There is still a lot of uncharitable feeling going around. Has anything changed at all? And I'm sure this is a question not easy to answer. It is possible to say that on the whole, things have improved quite a lot. We don't no longer have people going to war for 100 years or for decades over religious issues. People have, by and large, become more tolerant. Acceptance may be a little bit less than toleration, but at least most constitutions or most democratic societies find a way to accept the diversity. And either is the fear of the law enforcement or other factors, or just conforming to what is socially acceptable, even though people may have terrible thoughts of violence in their heart, at least we have relatively few people expressing it outwardly. So in some sense, if we look at it a kind of a general way, we could say things the world over have become better. Now, having said that, we still have to accept that there are pockets all over the world where things are quite bad, perhaps worse than they were 100 years ago. And so then the question that can come in our mind is, what do we do? Is it even worth trying? Will there ever be a time when there'll be total acceptance, when everyone will be loving and kind? Or will that forever remain an aspiration? A second thing would be, me as a human being, is there anything I can do to change the world around me, or at the very least, change myself? So these are some of the questions that can come as we read this very short opening address of Swamiji. And as we go forward, of course, we'll have a lot more to discuss on these things. But I would like to invite your thoughts and ideas about what do you think? What is your impression of this very brief and some of the ideas that Swamiji touched upon in this? So what is your impression when you read this?
Swamiji, I think it's pretty remarkable how he was able to set himself apart. It was obviously a stage full of very enlightened spiritual beings, and yet he both had the confidence, yet he didn't talk about himself at all, which to me is pretty remarkable. He didn't talk about himself and how he got there, and he just went straight to the point. And I think the modest yet strong strength that he displayed to this is probably what captivated the whole audience.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Johnny? Yeah.
So he spoke about acceptance, and here we're speaking about changing the world.
Hold it closer.
Sorry. Like, he spoke about acceptance, and we're speaking now about changing the world. Like, what is the difference? Like, when we shouldn't accept, and when, like, I don't know, when we're talking about acceptance, we should accept also someone that is not behaving well, or like, I don't know if I'm expressing my thoughts in the right way.
Yeah, so would acceptance include accepting the presence of fanaticism outside people? So should I be accepting fanatics and people who are doing destructive things? Would acceptance include that?
Like, what is the threshold? Where is the
Where
line?
do you stop? Okay,
Yeah.
That's a good point. What do you think?
What do I think?
No, I'm asking everybody. Yes, yeah. Yes. Any thoughts about it? So does acceptance have any limits? Yeah.
I think, Swamiji, that here I feel that communication is the key. If I feel that this is not tolerate, or I can't tolerate, so I can verbalize if I feel that. And again, I need to see that how it will, other person, whoever I think, is taking it. And if it is violent, I will, because violent is not the right thing, so I will move from there. But I do believe that communication makes a lot of difference, and how you say what you say.
Okay. Yeah. Any other thought? Yeah.
I don't know if I've kind of understood it completely, but I feel that his mention of the stream, his analogy of that, and his commentary on acceptance in general, I feel like his representation there was just to convey overall acceptance of everyone, and just for the spiritual beings that were there in that room to just have that deeper understanding. So he wasn't there just to represent Hinduism. He wants to convey that all religions lead to that one goal, and that was his purpose, like a humanitarian purpose rather than just religious representation. And is that how that's how I've kind of perceived it.
Yep, good point. The one challenge is here, that is, when we say all religions will lead ultimately to the one goal, what remains undefined is, what is a religion? Because what if someone were to say, my religion is to kill everybody? Now, would we just accept it? Well, that's a religion, and that will take that person to the goal. So clearly, we'll have to have some idea, at least mostly universally acceptable, like what would even constitute a religion? Not any person can get up and say, my religion is to just go and abuse everybody. Then we'll say, well, no, that's not acceptable, so that wouldn't be acceptance. So I think we might need to think in terms of something which is truly universal. And we might say, well, most normal people might agree that love is a universal virtue. Kindness, helping the needy, being honest, not exploiting others. So one might say that as long as these basic qualities, which we, I think most normal people might say, this is like the baseline. So if anything that violates this baseline, we might say, I don't think that could be religion. This is one thought. Srikant, you wanted to say something?
Swamiji, I feel reading the history and even our Puranas, this thing is kind of a cycle. So over the time, I think people go through, like, there will be a period of peace, or somebody like Swami Vivekananda or any Mahatma comes, he leads people towards such peace or unity, and as he goes away, it fades and things change, and again a new person or new Mahatma comes. So it looks like it keeps going on.
No, that's true. That's true. I mean, that's why we need reformers periodically come, because things seem to dilute over time, and we need reformers to kind of keep everyone in the right direction. But a more sticky question, of course, is about the limits of acceptance. As sometimes they say, well, we all want to be free, but your freedom ends where my nose begins. Like, right, so someone says, my freedom is to go and just box. And if I'm here, I'm saying, stop. No, you don't have freedom to punch me in my face. So I think any of these ideas can be taken to a very ridiculous extreme. So even the idea of freedom can be questioned in the sense of what many people understand by freedom is freedom to do whatever they want, freedom to do whatever they like. Not in terms of freedom from their own selfishness, freedom from their own negativities, freedom from their own thing. So the word freedom also can be misunderstood in many different ways. So a lot of these ideas, acceptance, freedom, truth, even truth, these are such powerful categories, but it's so open to misinterpretation. People can understand it in a way that suits them. And so these need a lot more refinement and reflection, I think. Yeah, Irina?
I just would like to say in a few words my opinion that until, for example, I open Vivekananda's work about evolution of humanity in sense of spiritual evolution. He has this idea, and when I read about it, so he speaks about ascending humanity to very spiritual level. So he has this idea. Unless I am, as a person, people don't keep this idea in their mind, we will just like going here, how it's in English, here from, so it's like this. Because if there is a spiritual, how can I say, plan for humanity to ascend, is it a question of belief? So Vivekananda had it in his mind. So unless I accept this idea, there is no point for me to be moral. There is no point for me to be ethical. Why? You just haphazard, just move like this. So we need, if a person, I believe, deeply interested in this question, let her open the work of Vivekananda, what he thinks about this evolution, and it's not in Advaita sense, but it's in a sense of intermediate, where humanity is. Mm-hmm. So for me it works. For me it brings me just meaning, hope. I understand why Christ came, why Buddha came. Nobody in cosmos, I believe, will waste his energy and time for us if we are so hopeless and stupid. Why? So if they come to teach, they spend their lifetime, their blood. So if we are not able to grasp it, who is going to suffer? We are going to suffer. So that's my understanding. Yeah. So let us know more about it. Let us read more about it. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's true. Very good. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Vivek?
I mean, maybe in one sense it's a personal challenge, because all these seeds of fanaticism, of ugliness, are within all of us. And the degree, it's a difference in degree and not in kind. The person who's acting it out and manifesting it is manifesting it physically, but we have to eliminate all these seeds from within.
That's
it almost seems to be a call to action in that regard also.
It's a very good point, very good point. So one of the ways that we can, there are, as I said, there are two different ways. One is we look at all this fanaticism and uncharitable feelings and etc. outside, and we can get upset by it, we can get angry about it, we can be despair about it. But then we also need to look into our own heart, that how much of fanaticism is there in my own heart? How often I'm uncharitable, maybe in my actions or in my thoughts or in my words. How often there is prejudice, bias, bigotry in my own life. And so when we are able to find at least traces of these in our own lives and recognize how difficult it is to remove them from within our own heart, we might become a little bit more kind to the state of the world in which we are. Because it is often easy to condemn and criticize what is happening outside. But it is also helpful to first look within. And that is why the story when Jesus said, "He that had not sinned should throw the first stone," I think it's important. So I will have the right even to condemn and criticize fanaticism outside when my own heart is completely removed, free from all fanaticism, even the slightest trace of it. In fact, a greater problem in the world today is a lot more people are looking outside than inside. A lot more people are trying to improve the world before they have tried to improve themselves. And I think for a while at least, if we just look in our own heart and try to remove the mischief that is going on inside, we might have less time and energy to create more mischief outside. And I think to the extent we are able to rid ourselves of these negativities in our own heart, we might then become better instruments of helping at least the people immediately around us remove their negativities. But first, it's like if I don't know how to swim, I can't help another drowning person. Swami Vivekananda once said that as Vedantists, we must learn to look at everything from a subjective standpoint. And I think that's something very helpful. So one way is, why is this world like this? Why is this terrible things happening in the world? And it can be extremely disturbing. A subjective way is, why am I seeing the world this way? Because clearly, I'm not seeing the world at all when I'm fast asleep. I'm seeing a very different world when I'm dreaming. Only when I wake up, I see this world. Now, when we look at the lives of many of these great mystics of the different traditions, when you look at Ramakrishna's life, and Ramakrishna would just look out and say, I see the play of the Divine Mother. Just see the divine, blissful divine everywhere. And this, just think about it. When he said something like that to his contemporaries, some of his contemporaries might have wondered, is he and us, are we living in the same world? We are just seeing terrible things, and he's just seeing there the blissful divine. So either there's something wrong in his what he's seeing, or there's something wrong in what we are seeing. And that's really the question, because those people whom we see or adore today as prophets, as incarnations, as saints and mystics, they are a very small minority. When they expressed what they have experienced looking at this world, and their experience is so different from the experience of all of us. Now, if we go simply by the democratic process, we can say majority of us see the world in one way, and here are these handful of people, they saw very differently. There's something wrong with them. And so we quickly realize in the field of spirituality, the majority need not always be right. that the enlightened ones are always going to be a very small number, that their experience is always going to be very different, and the only choice before us is to ask ourselves whether they are normal people or we are normal people. And a person on the spiritual path will say, their number is small, but what these great ones who are objects of our veneration, adoration today, they are the ones who saw things clearly. Right now, we are not seeing things clearly. And all of spiritual practice, all of our prayer, worship, meditation is really to acquire that clarity, so that we'll begin to see the world that these great ones saw. So we may not be seeing things as they are. And right now, in our present state, what we see is a troubled world. What we see is a world filled with fanaticism and all of that. If the change is merely subjective, do I have to ignore what's happening outside? And certainly not. What it does say is that if I work for the good of the world in a way that is selfless, with no selfishness involved in it at all, then I might be able to change the world a little bit for a short time, but if I've done it in the proper spirit, I will change myself. And if I change myself, that change will be permanent. And the more I change, the world will change for me. That's the ideal. It's possible to help the world in a different way. And there have been a lot of people who have done so much good to the world. But that helping the world often comes with strings attached. That helping the world can come, oh, if I do this for the world will give this to me. It's more a transaction rather than a help. Now, that doesn't mean the world doesn't get helped. The world will get the help from even these people, but these people who do it with a selfish motive may not get the full benefit of that help. They might get some benefit. A good, in Vedanta, they speak about punya and papa. So a good karma will bring some reward. A bad karma will bring some punishment. But if I can do that karma in a selfless way, then it will not be merely that's just a good karma bringing some benefit. The selfless way would mean that will bring me a clarity of the heart. And as we say, blessed are the pure in heart, but they shall see God. So if we don't want to see the troubled world around us, our heart must become pure. As long as the heart is not pure, we are doomed to see this world as it is. We can try to do good to it, but the way we do good to it should keep on purifying our heart. And when the heart is purified, instead of seeing this terrible world, we'll see nothing but God. And what Swami Vivekananda will then, in his subsequent talk, show that how should we conduct ourselves? What kind of a life we should lead so that our heart will become pure and we will encounter the divine everywhere. So these are the ideas that will come as we continue the study of the talks. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. On Sunday, our satsang subject will be the basics of meditation. Next week, we'll continue the study of Swamiji's Chicago talks. Our Tuesday and Saturday meditation will also continue as usual. Let's conclude with a prayer now. Om. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.